Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dari Yashodanandana Brajadana Randana Yashodanandana Brajadana Randana Yashodanandana Brajadana Randana Yashodanandana Brajadana Randana Yamuna Tira Vanashari Yamuna Tira Vanashari Yamuna Tira Vanashari Yamuna Tira Vanashari Jaya Radha Madhava Kund Bihari 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 Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Jaya Gopi Jana Yashodanandana Brajadana Randana Yashodanandana Brajadana Randana Yashodanandana Brajadana Randana Yashodanandana Brajadana Randana Jamuna Tira Vanashari Yamuna Tira Vanashari Yamuna Tira Vanashari Yamuna Tira Vanashari Jaya Radha Madhava Kund Bihari 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 Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Krishna Hare Sri Srimad His Divine Grace, Srila Charan Arvind Bhakti Vedanta Swami, Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, ISKCON DDP Founder Acharya Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai, Grantaraj Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Jai Nitai Gaurapi, all glories to the assembled. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru, to Sri Guru Ranga. All glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Ajnanatirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं येन तस्मै
श्रीगुरवे नमः।
श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं
येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्।
वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं
श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश्च
श्रीरूपं
साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवम् साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवम् श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते। तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य
देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं
ततो जयमुदीरये।
Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a very major conquest, let us first offer respectful obeisances unto Narayana, Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayana Rishi, Supreme Being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srimati Vyasadeva, the author. Nastatayesha Bhadreshu
नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु
Bhagavata Sevaya
नित्यं भागवत सेवया
Bhagavati Tamashloke
भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके
Bhagavati Naistithi
भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी।
Regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering the service unto the pure devotees. All that is troublesome within our heart becomes destroyed without the truth and noise, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental song, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama
इदं भागवतं नाम पुराणं ब्रह्मसंहितम् उत्तमश्लोकचरितं चकार भगवान् ऋषिः निःश्रेयसाय लोकस्य धन्यं स्वस्यै नमः।
is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people, to be well successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Shri Krishna Chaitanya,
Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Jai Advaita Gadadhar,
Gaura Bhakta Vrinda,
Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda,
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna,
Krishna Hare Hare,
Krishna Krishna Hare Hare,
Hare Rama,
Hare Rama,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Surabhyai Namaha. Om Surabhyai Namaha. Om Surabhyai Namaha.
Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone to the Bhagavatam class. We have a good class this morning. Welcome to everybody from Pune, right? And everybody should be quiet. Everybody here should be quiet. Should be quiet. We continue to read from our first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 3, which is entitled Krishna is the source of all incarnations. And today we are, let's see, text 27, which has a very short report. So we will read, text 28 has a very long report. So let's see here. We will read text number 28, which is a very famous and important text as well. Ete samsa kalaha pumsaha Krishnas tu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Vridayanti Yuge Ete Chamsa Kala Pumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Vridayanti Yuge Ete Chamsa Kala Pumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Vridayanti Yuge Ete Chamsa Kala Pumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Vridayanti Yuge
Ete Chamsa Kala Pumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Vridayanti Yuge
Ete chamsa kalaha pumsaha Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Vridayanti Yuge Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam इंद्रारिव्याकुलं लोकं मृडयन्ति युगे युगे
एते चांशा कला पुंसः
एते चांशकला पुंसः
कृष्णस्तु भगवान् स्वयं
कृष्णस्तु भगवान् स्वयं
इन्द्रारि व्याकुलं लोकम्
इन्द्रारिव्याकुलं लोकं
गुडयन्ति युगे युगे
मृडयन्ति युगे युगे
Ete, all these, cha, and amsha, plenary portions,
plenary portions,
kalaha, portions of the plenary portions,
portions of the plenary portions,
Pumsaha, of the Supreme,
Krishna,
Lord Krishna, two, but Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead,
personality of Godhead,
Swayam, in person, Indra Ari, the enemies of Indra, Vyakulam, disturbed, Lokam, all the planets, Vridayanti, gives protection, Yuge, in different ages. So before reading the translations to 28, we will read text number 27. I'll just read the Sanskrit once and then go to the translation and short report. Vishayo manavo deva manuputra mahaucha saha kala sarve hare eva sapraja pataya smitaha. Translation and purport by John Gracie Prabhupada. All the rishis, manus, demigods, and descendants of Manu, who are especially powerful, are plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord. This also includes the Prajapatis. Report. Those who are comparatively less powerful are called Vibhuti, and those who are comparatively more powerful are called Avesha, incarnations. So the translations to text 28 and report. All of the above mentioned incarnations are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord. But Lord Sri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. All of them appear on planets whenever there is a disturbance created by the atheists. The Lord incarnates to protect the theists. Everyone kind of repeat after me. All the above mentioned incarnations are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord. But Lord Sri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. All of them appear on planets whenever there is a disturbance created by the atheists. The Lord incarnates to protect the theists. Report. In this particular stanza, Lord Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, is distinguished from other incarnations. He is counted amongst the avatars incarnations, because out of his causeless mercy, the Lord descends from his transcendental abode. Avatara means one who descends. All the incarnations of the Lord, including the Lord himself, descend on the different planets of the material world, as also in different species of life to fulfill particular missions. Sometimes he comes himself, and sometimes his different plenary portions or parts of the plenary portions, or his differentiated portions, directly or indirectly empowered by him, descend on this material world to execute certain specific functions. Originally, the Lord is full of all opulences, all prowess, all fame, all beauty, all knowledge, and all renunciation. When they are partly manifested through the plenary portions or parts of the plenary portions, it should be noted that certain manifestations of his different powers are required for those particular functions. When in the room small electric bulbs are displayed, it does not mean that the electric powerhouse is limited by the small bulbs. The same powerhouse can supply power to operate large-scale industrial dynamos with greater volts. Similarly, the incarnations of the Lord display limited powers because so much power is needed at that particular time. For example, Lord Parashuram and Lord Nrsimha displayed unusual opulence by killing the disobedient Kshatriyas 21 times and killing the greatly powerful atheist Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu was so powerful that even the demigods in other planets would tremble simply by the unfavorable raising of his eyebrow. The demigods in the higher level of material existence many times excel the most well-to-do human beings in duration of life, beauty, wealth, paraphernalia, and in all other respects. Still, they were afraid of Hiranyakashipu. Thus, we can simply imagine how powerful Hiranyakashipu was in this material world. But even Hiranyakashipu was cut into small pieces by the nails of Lord Nrsimha. This means that anyone materially powerful cannot stand the strength of the Lord's nails. Similarly, Jamadagnya displayed the Lord's power to kill all the disobedient kings powerfully situated in their respective states. the Lord's empowered incarnation, Narada, and plenary incarnation, Varaha, as well as indirectly empowered Lord Buddha, created faith in the mass of people. The incarnations of Rama and Dhanvantari displayed his fame, and Balaram, Mohini, and Vama exhibited his beauty. Dattatreya, Matsya, Kumara, and Kapila exhibited his transcendental knowledge. Nara and Narayana Rishis exhibited his renunciation. So all the different incarnations of the Lord, indirectly or directly, manifested different features. But Lord Krishna, the primeval Lord, exhibited the complete features of Godhead. And thus it is confirmed that he is the source of all other incarnations. And the most extraordinary feature exhibited by Lord Sri Krishna was his internal, energetic manifestation of his pastimes with the cowherd girls. His pastimes with the gopis are all displays of transcendental existence, bliss, and knowledge, although these are manifested apparently as sex love. The specific attraction of his pastimes with the gopis should never be misunderstood. The Bhagavatam relates these transcendental pastimes in the 10th canto. And in order to reach the position to understand the transcendental nature of the Lord's pastimes with the gopis, the Bhagavatam promotes the student gradually in 9 other cantos. I'm halfway through the purport. I'll just take a few seconds here. So this is extremely important verse, which is referred to and very often quoted by our acharyas, in particular by Srila Jiva Goswami and his Sat Sandarbhas, to actually establish a very unique position and the unique identity of Godhead. Especially here in India, we hear about so many gods. Of course, God can be written either with a capital G or with a small g. We also know, again, especially here in India, of demigods. The Prabhupada is making reference here in the purport how demigods who reside in the heavenly planets, Swargaloka, they have much more qualities and facilities and opulence, etc., than any human being on the planet. But still, because of one personality, namely Hiranyakashipu, who became very, very powerful, even the demigods were afraid of him. And of course, to rectify the situation, Lord Nrsimhadev appeared, and he he displayed naturally superhuman powers because he is an incarnation of the Lord. The Prabhupada gives a list of different incarnations who displayed different qualities and features of Godhead. None, however, no one other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, can display the unique qualities which, although Prabhupada doesn't mention the word rasa, but actually Lord Krishna, his special feature or attraction is that when he appears in Vrindavan, on our planet, he is able to manifest or to display what no other incarnation, Prabhupada explains as well, is actually in highly even mysterious feature of Lord in terms of his interaction and personal relationships, which is what makes the pastimes of the Lord very, very attractive. And Srila Prabhupada warns, of course, in the purport here, that those pastimes, those very confidential and intimate pastimes of the Lord are only described later on in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 10th canto. Many years ago, when I was in Mayapur, I was visiting Calcutta, and I came in contact with one very pious young man who was from a Brahmana family. He was mentioning how this is still the case here in India. Brahmana families and Kshatriya families, very often, they will have their own personal temple, their own deities. You know, people in the West only know about deities in temples, isn't it? But we know when we come to India or when we interact with people from especially Brahmana background, Kshatriya background, means the Dvijas, those who are Dvija, Brahmana, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, one of their daily duties or responsibilities is to worship actually the Lord. And many families, that is part of the tradition, they have their own temple. Part of the house is actually a temple. And every day they engage in very, very elaborate worship of the Lord. And all the family members are part of that. Prabhupada one time explained how everyone in the family is meant to be present for the darshan. Everyone is meant to participate, at least for darshan, every day. And in some families, the mother will impose a fine. If you don't come for darshan, if you don't participate, then you have to pay a fine. So I was mentioning this particular incident this young man was explaining that, yeah, they had their own temple, and he was, somehow we ended up speaking about the Bhagavatam. So he was telling me, I mean, he was maybe about 35 years old, and he had not yet read the Bhagavatam. And then I asked him why. So then he explained that actually my mother told me that I can only read the Bhagavatam after a certain period of time. In other words, within the family, his parents, just as Prabhupada was explaining here, the confidential pastimes, and we can say the confidential nature of Krishna and his pastimes can only be heard from those who are sufficiently prepared or purified in consciousness. And of course, the understanding is that if one regularly, properly hears the Srimad Bhagavatam from in a methodical way, from first canto to second canto, etc., then by the time one reaches the 10th canto, one is meant to be sufficiently purified to actually understand the content of the 10th canto. You see. Of course, Prabhupada would often criticize certain people, namely impersonalists, who actually don't really understand these pastimes of the Lord, by going directly, immediately, to these pastimes that are described in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. We say theology. There is what is called philosophy, and then there is theology. Both have to do with subject matters that are very elevated. So, philosophy has to do with in English, another word used is metaphysics. Physics has to do with matter, material things. Metaphysics means above matter. So it's, above matter. So above gross matter. Above gross matter, our subtle body, mind, intelligence is dealing with such matters. But above subtle matter, above topics, let's say simply intellectual, there is theology. Theology has to do with theology, the science of theism. Theism. So theism has to do with spirituality. So that is even more, that is above subtle, that is above material, subtle subjects. And therefore, the special feature of our line, of our Guru Parampara, is directly connected with, we could say, the most, another word which is describing the very subtle nature of the topic is what is called esoteric. Esoteric means very, very fine, very subtle, and generally of a very confidential nature as well. So, right from the beginning, I mean, we're in the first canto here, third chapter, the first canto, Srila Prabhupada in his purport, because the verse is making reference to Krishna as being the original Bhagavan, as being the source of all the incarnations, is giving a little hint or a little glimpse of what is being described, what will be described in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. So these subject matters of Godhead have always been, you could say, kept somewhat hidden because very easily one can misunderstand these subject matters. It is described by our acharyas that actually the nature of Krishna, especially his pastimes in Vrindavan, especially his pastimes with the gopis in Vrindavan, and in particular with Srimati Radharani, up until just a little bit prior to the advent of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was very less known, because it is very, very confidential subject matter. So this verse is clearly making this point that although Krishna is also listed amongst the incarnations, we should understand that he is not ordinary incarnation. We were discussing this a few days ago, that he's not actually referred to as avatar, but as avatari. Avatari means the source of all incarnations. And the subject matter of the Bhagavatam, the unique feature of the Srimad Bhagavatam, as explained by Srila Vyasadeva, who is the author of the Bhagavatam, is to give us that proper understanding of Krishna, which is especially described in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. Actually, because the purport continues and is still quite long, I think we'll save the rest of the purport for tomorrow's class. So we have come in this chapter to the point where all of the different incarnations, up to 20 incarnations, ending with Kalki incarnation, have been briefly described. They are described in more detail in other places. And of course, although this verse is most important, it is not, we should know that this is not the only verse that is making this point, or clearly describing Krishna as being in a very unique position, as being the origin of all incarnations. There are many, beginning from the Bhagavad Gita itself, aham sarvasya prabhavo matassadam pravartate iti matva bhajantimam buddha bhava samanditaha. There are many places where this is clearly stated, how Krishna is that original personality of Godhead, and of course the primary goal and purpose of the Bhagavatam is to introduce us to this whole dimension of relationship, isn't it? That is nicely explained by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that is also a very unique, you can say, unique feature of our Sampradaya, Vaishnava Sampradaya. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu summarized actually the whole philosophy of Krishna consciousness in three statements or three levels of knowledge. It's very important. If one nicely understands these three statements given and explained also in the, especially in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. We were discussing yesterday how the Chaitanya Charitamrita is like the postgraduate, most elevated, brings us to that most elevated level of transcendence. And so those three statements, I'm sure you've heard them before, but they are very, each one of them is very deep and profound in itself. Sambandha Gyan, Abhideya Gyan, and Prayojana Gyan. The science or knowledge of relationship, then the knowledge or the science of activity, once we understand the nature of our relationship, of our identity, then we can engage in proper activities. And then the third aspect, the science of what is the final goal or destination, which is of course to develop our dormant love for Krishna. Jai Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi Ki Jai, Shri Krishna Balaram Ki Jai. So let me just read the verse again, and if there's any comment or question, you can. Translation: all the above mentioned incarnations are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord. But Lord Sri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. All of them appear on planets whenever there is a disturbance created by the atheists. The Lord incarnates to protect atheists. Any comments or questions?
भगवान बता रहे थे रेल में पहला भगवान विष्णु थे, बाद में देव की स्थापना किए थे कृष्ण कृष्ण भगवान मूल रूप से आता भगवान
Your question should not be as long as the papers.
भगवान मूल रूप से आता लिखा है ना, लेकिन उधर भगवान विष्णु का रूप में आते बाद में वो कृष्ण का रूप लेते हैं.
He is asking that when Lord Krishna appears in the jail,
When Lord Krishna appears in the jail,
so he was asking that first he appears as Lord Vishnu,
yeah,
and then afterwards Mata Devaki prays to him that please become a child. Then
yeah, natural
so
baby.
yeah, so he is asking that why he appears as Lord Vishnu, because he is original Krishna. So
because Vishnu has 4 arms. Means generally people they they will more easily understand that he is the Supreme Lord by appearing in his 4-armed Vishnu form. I'm sure our acharyas have explained possibly or given more reasons for that, but it's to indicate that his appearance is an unusual appearance. He appears in his Vishnu form, and then as you mentioned on the request or by the prayers of the Bhakti, then he appears. Because a mother can only relate to an ordinary child, and when the Lord appeared in his 4-armed form, they naturally offered obeisances to him, but it's very difficult for a mother to cuddle a 4-armed baby. I'm sure there's, partly to indicate that he is, although just like Krishna, when he performs his pastimes after being transported or brought from Mathura to Vrindavan, although he's an ordinary, seemingly, externally ordinary boy, and he's so, we could say ordinary, although at times he does very extraordinary things, but he's so ordinary that our acharyas explain that all the residents of Vrindavan, they don't treat him as God, they treat him as, the most wonderful boy of the whole village of Vrindavan. And it's only in this way that they can actually relate to him as a young boy, that Mother Yashoda can relate to him in motherly affection and parental love with Krishna. So he appears in his 4-armed form to establish his, you could say, identity as the Supreme Lord, because if somebody appears just like all of us, we cannot understand. But Krishna, in his ordinary form as a human being, by his so many activities, demonstrated that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What was that?
This one, message.
Huh?
Message came.
Yeah. Any other?
Original form is through him,
Huh? Original form is through him,
Krishna.
isn't it?
I asked him.
The original form of the Lord, yeah, because that's why, for example, in Vaikuntha, on all of the Vaikuntha planets, except one planet, on all the Vaikuntha planets, all the residents have 4 arms, because they worship Lord Narayan, who has 4 arms. And from Narayan, of course, comes the Vishnu incarnations, in the second Narayan manifestation. except one planet, which is Goloka, where the residents have two arms, like Krishna. So Krishna's original form is the form he displayed in Vrindavan, and so that is the original form of the Lord. It's actually mentioned in the Bible that man is made as the image of God. So human form is a reflection of the original image or form of the Lord. But if you want, you can have the four arms, and one can reside in any planet in Vaikuntha. And generally that is the case for those who